Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Top 5 DEI, the premier podcast for and about DEI professionals. I'm your host, Jason Lambert, aka Dr. J, and my goal is to interview every person in the world who manages, practices, teaches, researches, or publishes anything related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm so glad you tuned in, and if you are ready to learn about some insightful DEI practices from experts from all over the world, and about DEI experiences from people just like you, join me and let's dive right in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Top 5 DEI, the premier podcast for and about DEI professionals. I'm your host, Jason Lambert, aka Dr. J. We have a great guest with us today, someone I've watched her career from the time I first met her, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. But before I get into that, for those who aren't familiar with Top 5 DEI, what we do is we find DEI professionals, if they're researchers, if they're practitioners, consultants, etc., authors, all of the above. And our goal is to interview all of these individuals who are in these professions around the world. And what we do is we send them a list of questions, like 60 questions or more, and we ask them just to pick 5 questions, or they can send us 5 of the top 5 questions, and then we ask those questions. But the most fun part is at the end, in the spirit of diversity and inclusion, we get to learn what are their top 5 preferences, whether it's the personal top 5 desserts, books, anything, you name it, they get to let us know. All right. So let me dive in and tell you about our guest today. We have Carliss Miller, Ph.D., Dr. Carliss Miller, who is a DEI scholar-practitioner actively engaged in strategic efforts to elevate inclusion and belonging in organizations. After a decade in academia as a leadership and diversity scholar, Carliss recently rejoined the private sector to live out her professional aim, bridging theory and practice with a focus on advancing inclusion, equity, and belonging for all in the workplace. Skilled in mixed methods, research, and leadership advisory, she is equipped with over a decade of advanced knowledge in organizational behavior, human resources management, team leadership, and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion research, and insights to aid leaders in positive organizational transformations. Carliss holds a Ph.D. in International Management Studies from the University of Texas at Dallas, specializing in organizational behavior and human resource management. She also has a bachelor's degree from the University of Texas at Arlington, my alma mater, and an MBA from the University of Florida. Carliss values and pursues organizational research that pushes the boundaries of our thinking and uses quantitative and qualitative approaches to examine social anomalies in organizations. Her primary research interests are in workplace diversity, status, relational demography, systemic structural bias, for example. Leadership, some examples of that are emergent leadership, LMX or leader-member exchange theory and conflict, and workplace deviance, incivility or off-duty deviance. Her work has been presented at regional, national, and international conferences such as the Academy of Management, Southern Management Association, Eastern Academy of Management International, and Midwest Academy of Management. She has published in Human Resource Management Review, Journal of Leadership and Organizational Studies, the Journal of Business and Entrepreneurship, Leadership and Organization Development Journal, and International Journal of Human Resource Management. In research and practice, she delights in unveiling and dissecting inconspicuous organizational phenomena that may hinder individuals, teams, and organizations from reaching their full potential. Outside of her professional roles, Carliss applies her skills and passions towards the program development for youth as the program director of Jack and Jill of America, Incorporated, the Woodlands chapter in Texas, where she is committed to making a difference in the lives of children through education, culture exploration, and career exposure. She is also a Ph.D. project faculty member, paying it forward by mentoring, encouraging, and supporting graduate business students invested in building a stronger, more diverse workforce. Her mission is to educate, empower, and encourage others to thrive and lead courageously, authentically, and inclusively. Carliss is currently the Senior Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Toro Company and dream investor of Team Miller, Jason, Addison, and Ian. So please help me welcome Dr. Carliss Miller. All right.
Thank you. I hope nobody fell asleep while you were reading that.
You know what? It's worth it. We need to celebrate you, give people their flowers now, give your flowers now, right? That's important because sometimes we're not able to do that. And so I've seen your career from day one and seen all the wonderful things you've done. I love your research, especially the crabs in the barrel. I mean, and I know that that gets a lot of attention and exposure. I mean, I think it's some groundbreaking research that you've done. And now you're able to take your talents back into the corporate sector. So you were in industry, then academia and research, and then back to industry. So you like, it's like the trifecta. You like LeBron, just going from here to there, wherever you go, you're making it great, right? That's how I see it.
Thank you. Or it could be I'm straddling the fence.
That's what I'm doing. So that's me. That's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make it every day, you know. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. Of course, this is recorded from the live studio audience. I love saying that. I don't think too many podcasts do that, right? We talked to you, we gave you your top, asked you what your top 5 were. We have your top 5 questions. We also have your personal top 5. And just going to jump right on in with your first question, if that's okay. All right.
Sure.
I don't, it sounds like a quiz show or something. Doesn't like it's pressure, but it isn't. We're just going to have a lot of fun here. Dr. Miller, how did you get into the DEI field? Tell us your journey.
Well, I think it depends on how we classify the DEI field. I feel like, we've gone through some naming conventions and a naming journey of our field and of our practice, but I feel like I've been doing this work since I was a kid, honestly. I'm really grateful for my parents for encouraging me to be a critical thinker. And so from as far back as I can remember, well, to the thoughts that I had that are still a part of my memory, I've been trying to make sense of some of the experiences and observations that I made at the intersection of the isms or these identities or, I think about, some people as kids, they collected baseball cards and marbles. I collected work stories. So yeah, I just noticed these different relationship patterns that were formed based on how people thought how much they were alike or how they thought they were different. Sometimes similarities attracted each other and sometimes it was opposites attract, but I just wanted to make sense of that. And I think of some of my early childhood memories growing up in Houston on the east side, going to Pleasantville Elementary. My school was predominantly Black and predominantly Mexican. But then when I got into this program, the Vanguard program, it was all white. And I was like, why? It was just like interesting. It's like this dynamic, like we're all at the same campus. But once I go to this class, I'm like feeling extremely isolated. And I didn't really understand that, especially given the what we would now say the rich cultural diversity of my neighborhood and of the school. So that was just something that stuck out to me. Thinking about even within my own family or my friendship circles, the comments that people would make about skin color. So those kind of colorisms and the attributions that people would say about me or about a cousin or a relative or even my mom. I am darker skin complexion. My mom has a lighter skin complexion or fair skin. And people would say like, oh, are you adopted? Or, oh, if you were like your mom, people would like you. I mean, just real crazy stuff like that. And my mama, she reinforced my self-esteem. She was very good to make sure she's like, my baby is beautiful.
I heard
so,
that.
so she was not having that, but it was just interesting. Or even the hair comments, whether or not the texture of your hair was more tightly coiled or more loose coiled, and making statements like, you'll be more accepted in this environment because of your hair texture. So those are things that I wanted to make sense because as just a critical thinker, I was like, why? That doesn't make sense to me.
Wow.
And then I'd say from that, just so as a kid and taking those stories and those experiences, going to Clark Atlanta University for my first year. So I've been in an environment where I felt like I was one of my minority in terms of race and ethnicity. And then I went to Clark Atlanta University, which is a historically Black college and university where 96% of the population were Black or Black identifying or Black presenting. And so that aspect of diversity wasn't really salient in that environment. It didn't stand out. It was more so like, oh, you from Texas. They got cars in Texas? Yeah, they have cars. Someone asked me, well, where's your horse and buggy? You
I
don't
used to think
stop.
I used to think the same way. Well, I'm from Chicago. I thought the same way when I first moved down here. So I apologize to native Texans, people born in Texas, but us Yankees, sometimes we don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Like, you don't know until you make the statement or you ask the question, right? So, people making statements that aren't, weren't aligned with my reality. I thought it was, well, let me inform you, let me educate you. It bothered me. Like, yes, we have cars, we have paved roads, and we also do ride horses on in the hood. You will see a horse on the feeder.
Yes, yeah, that was a cultural shock. I was on the highway. I was on 287, and there was somebody riding a horse alongside, like on the like. Yeah, I don't know how you explain it, but not like on the road, but on the grassy part area. I was like, oh my God, this is for real. I'm really seeing a horse on the expressway. But yeah.
Yep. That's a real sighting from where I'm from. But yeah, just wanting to help and make sense and seeing the difference when someone's when someone's questions is based in just openness and curiosity versus if someone's like tightly held to whatever belief that they've shaped around this presentation of a difference or other, or just some judgments or assumptions that may be made. So I just wanted to kind of make sense of those. And I think going into my MBA program, I went thinking, because I worked in radio after I graduated from UTA.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yep.
Interesting.
I did. I worked in broadcasting for a small boutique media broadcasting company in Tampa, Florida, WTMP. And I mean, it was the audience. It was like a more of an urban state. It actually was more soul. It was like old school R&B. I mean, meeting Smokey Robinson.
Oh, Anita Baker.
Yes.
Smokey Robinson.
I met John B. If you remember John.
Oh, John B. Yeah.
Dougie Fresh. Anyway, so I worked for an old school radio station, and I was in sales, but I also did production, and trying to help business owners, small business owners, churches, nonprofits, different types of companies try to reach a very targeted audience, and not just a Black audience, but a more mature Black audience that had more, what do you call it, money to spend. And so I just remember
income. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not residual, disposable income, discretionary. Yes. And so helping companies, helping leaders how to translate or how to reach authentically and capture this audience. And I said, well, you can't just try to go, if you want to reach them, you need to understand them. You need to understand their desires, their motivations, their passions. And I'm saying I was like because, but even though the clientele, our audience base was a little older than me, I'm like, well, these are my parents. And I'm like, if you don't come in here like you just want to exploit because of the fact that they can buy your stuff, but really meet them where they are. So anyway, that was a really cool experience, just having those conversations. And I thought, I want to do more of this work. So then I wouldn't have called it DEI work, but if you think about what we do, then I was skilled in reaching.
Okay. Yeah. Because you're reaching a different demographic group, even though it's a Black audience, right? Yeah. I don't know what just happened. I think we had a glitch real quick. Did we froze a bit? I don't know if it was me or you, but
it was me. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
That's a sign that I'm talking too much. I know you just did the Sandman on me. I know you did. I'm going to bring it full circle. I'm going to close the loop. Okay. So I
All
did
right.
that. I went to UF. I thought I was going to study brand management because I
Mhm.
liked what I was doing, with the consumer behavior stuff. Then I took a course called organizational behavior, and it just kind of changed.
Yeah, my
You
favorite
teach that, right?
course. Yes,
It just kind of changed my life.
me too. Changed my life.
Yeah, it was a game changer. So thinking of all those stories, all those experiences, all those nuances and observations, and then now I had kind of like a tool and a framework of how to make sense or try to make sense of some of these observations, and realizing that it was at the intersection of the individual level, like our own personal identities. But it wasn't just about what we believed about ourselves, but it was also about what others kind of projected onto us. So I thought
Mm.
that was pretty cool to dissect and understand. And at the time, I thought about staying on to just study more and do my PhD. But then I was like, I'm broke. I would like to go get a job. So I went to Procter and Gamble as an HR manager, got a chance to work as an HR business partner, and all of my special projects were really in this space that we now call DEI work.
Oh wow.
And so leaving there and just wanting to get deeper, more refined in my research skills, went back for my PhD as you shared in that super long bio. I'm so sorry, y'all.
That's okay. And that's around when we met at the
Yeah.
PhD project conference. I
Yep.
think so. Yeah.
And then now, like
That
you
was some
said, I'm
years ago.
back. It was some years ago, but I feel like society or some companies are like very serious about their commitments of how do they advance their efforts. And that
Mhm.
there are companies who are committed, like the company I work for, the Toro Company, who do not desire, who do not want to do performative DEI. I want to do that real change, a real transformation, but
Yeah.
are very careful and very thoughtful. And so I wanted to find in this next phase of my journey in life. I still feel young. I'm like, I can have a career shift if I want to. And I wanted to find an opportunity to apply these skills, these thoughts, these ideas, instead of just being outside of the game, just telling folks what to do, and then like, all right, well, do your best. I gave you the framework, go forth and conquer. Now I'm like in it, I'm part of it. And that's just an exciting phase of life for me to be in right now.
Wow, that's exciting. Man, I didn't realize it's funny how you know people and I mean, and we've hung out. I've met your mom, all that stuff, right? You and my wife
Yep.
hang out, and it's so many things I didn't know. Share like we have so many similar things. For example, my neighborhood. I grew up in an all black neighborhood, and my school was all black. And I remember my senior years, first time I was at a school where it was pretty diverse. And then you go to college, and then it's and what I mean by diverse is there were more white people than black people. That's what I mean. And so it was
Hmm.
diverse. It was diverse because there was multiple racial groups there, right? But yeah, and then my sister and I, people don't realize that when we look at the like diaspora, how any type of characteristics, Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about this, can come out of the black people. He said, if you want to find the shortest people in the world, there's places in Africa. The tallest people is in Africa. The lightest people, even the eye color, all that stuff, all comes from that. And so my sister and I, we same parents, but I used to get this all the time. She's light skinned, much lighter than me, and you know me, I'm dark skinned. And we both have like what some people would call like that, whatever, just kind of wavy hair. But we would get the same thing. They would think that we weren't related. I said, "It's my sister." "Oh, you lying? Y'all adopted. It's not your real sister." And so I think it's like we both have these unique experiences. So at an
Hmm.
early age, we were already asking these questions that tied to, you know, different perceptions people hold, right? Different ways they perceive me, all these things tied to race and these experiences. And so that's very interesting. And and so when we talk about like diversity, equity, inclusion, everyone has their unique experience, their unique perspective. And so the next question is, how do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion? And so in other words, what do those terms mean to you?
There's, yeah, I'm so glad you asked. And I feel like it's important, like even with the journey, we're early in our journey at the Toro Company. And one thing that we're doing is we're not projecting our definitions. We're asking, just like you're asking me, we're asking our employees, what do these terms mean for you? So let's have a collective definition. I think the work of DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion together, is really about elevating humanity inside and outside of organizations in our societies. I really believe that, again, the work together is honoring, recognizing, and celebrating those dimensions of difference as well as perceived similarities. So that would be the diversity piece for me, is our real or perceived differences and similarities,
Right.
and how they affect our interactions with other people, with institutions, and relationships. That's how I see it. I see it through also through, a social identity lens. Like diversity is like just as the what is what people see, what people perceive.
Mm.
But when it becomes like, when it's salient for me, when it's important to me, the diversity aspect of the what people think, see, or feel, or recognize, what is of value to me in a given environment, that kind of signals my sense of self, my emotions. When I feel like that is under attack, it's like, well, I feel something.
Right.
So that, to me, that's what diversity is, and the activation of, as people are forming these kind of in groups, out groups, or perceptions of what this means if you're different from me or the same for me, that impacts our interactions at work, in life, at school. For the equity piece, again, I'm going to distinguish between the reality and perceptions. The reality or perceptions around fairness in outcomes, in access, whether it be access to opportunities or access to information. And the reason why I say perceptions when I think about equity, I mean, and the systems that are created to perpetuate who receives and who doesn't. Becoming a parent, no one told me, and having more than one kid, no one told me that I would be dealing with battles of perceived equity every day. Like, you love him more than me.
Right.
He had more chicken nuggets than me.
I know.
Why does she get to go first?
Or how about this one? You give the young one $1, you give the older one 4 quarters. And like, he got more than me. I mean,
Yep.
anyway.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes.
it's about perception of equity, right?
Yes.
Like 4 quarters, it's the same as $1, but where you're at determines what you perceive sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's in reference to what we see someone else is getting or not getting. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's
yeah.
some type of reference point. So that's what equity means to me. And, making or being aware and being concerned with I always try to assume positive intent. So when there are instances of unintentional inequities, but then being committed to doing something about it. So first assessing, auditing, and then what do we do about it? Asking the question. So like you did with the example, I love that with the $1 and the 4 quarters. Let's have a conversation. Is this an issue of inequity? Is it just because you're counting? Is it do you have more value in getting 4 quarters instead of a solid dollar bill? Does it even matter to you? If it does, then that informs your perception.
Yeah.
But if I explain, like, this has the exact same value, and you know what? You can go to the bank and exchange it, and they'll give you $1. Bam, now y'all have the same.
Yeah.
And then inclusion, that's the behaviors. I feel like it's the intentional and purposeful behaviors that, whether you're an individual or team or group or leaders, to create an environment where everyone can succeed. These are the environments that facilitate the outcome, that sense of belonging, where people feel valued, welcomed, respected, and supported. And I say intentional because sometimes we can unintentionally exclude people, right? Just because I may be a little self-centered one day, thinking about myself, or that's just not where you just weren't thinking. But when you try to become more intentional and purposeful about ensuring voices that when you just take a pause and say, what voice have I not heard from?
Mm-hmm.
That needs to weigh in.
Yeah, I think like it's a muscle too, or or a muscle memory as well. Like, for example, I was speaking somewhere the other day and we were talking just, it's funny that you mentioned that, just as you mentioned, like if you're at a conference and somebody comes up and it's sometimes we all make the mistake of not introducing that person that walks up that we know to say hi to us when we're conversing with someone else, right? It happens. It happens. And
It
sometimes
does.
some people get offended by that and walk away and they're like, oh, I don't feel included. You didn't introduce me. Sometimes we just forget, but you're right. But the
Yeah.
more we're intentional about doing things like that, and I guess in the organizational context, intentional about hearing the voices of others, like you said, you know, over time it becomes easier in the autopilot, but we still have to go back and train to make sure that, that we're not losing sight of voices again, because it's kind of like a feedback loop. We have to constantly
Yeah.
reinforce our intentional awareness, I think, right?
Yeah. And I think it also helps with, a person, if we feel slighted or like we haven't been included, that we create, we feel, and I know it happens through relationships, and sometimes it just takes an act of courage, kind of have these brave conversations to say, I kind of felt the way. Like I
Right.
wanted to be a part of that. And I know you didn't, I'm just going to assume you didn't mean to not introduce me, but I felt a little slighted, and I'm kind of an introvert, so I'm not going to just introduce myself. So I just wanted to let you know, I want to be a part, even if I seem, like it doesn't matter. It does matter. So next time, will you just please remember to introduce me if it's cool,
Right.
if you don't mind.
It's,
And most people be like, "Oh, my bad. You know what? Thank you.
yeah.
Yes, that
Or at
was."
least, or at least that's how in the context of organizations, that's how they should be. But sometimes, sometimes it doesn't
Sometimes
happen,
it'll
right?
be the other person can get defensive.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, sometimes the other person get defensive, but I'm pretty sure not in Toro.
Listen, I don't do that.
Yeah, being
No,
inclusive,
no, but
Toro's inclusive based on
no, what I was
what
gonna say is
I've
like
heard from you. But yeah, you have to worry about
everyone
that.
has an opportunity to miss the mark. I guess that's
Yeah,
what I'm
that's
trying to
true.
say.
That's true. Yeah, we have to be able to show grace. That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, because we're all learning and everything evolves. Speaking of inclusive organizations, because I'm pretty sure you know a lot about organizations, you know a lot about inclusion, and some of your research looks at different identities and their backgrounds and different perspectives of people. I'd like to also know, let's switch gears a bit. We're talking about organizations. Let's dive into your research since you're multi-talented, multi-skilled. Is there any DEI research you have conducted or are currently working on that you wish to share?
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned it earlier. My work on the crabs in the barrel syndrome. For anyone not familiar with this metaphor, it is likened to the behavior of crabs in a bucket. So I'll tell you a story. The metaphor goes, there is these two people fishing on the bank. And one says to the other, if you don't put a lid on your bucket, the crabs will escape. The person says, I don't have to worry about putting a lid on the bucket because as long as there's at least two, if one tries to crawl out, the other one will pull it back down. So that metaphor, it drove my dissertation, and I'm not as actively engaged in research right now, but the phenomenon is still something that I still work on and dissect in, like you said, different realms of identity or marginalized identities. What that what it's illustrating or what it's saying, my research has unveiled or suggests that in certain types of environment and in certain contexts, that especially in those that promote kind of tokenism, where if you're the only one of X identity variable, there's a scarcity. There's not enough room to progress or to advance. And so when, say, a person of a marginalized identity, they're in the organization, they're climbing the ranks, when another person comes, they may not be at the same level. They may be reporting to them, but the behavior, instead of one that is welcoming, encouraging, supportive, the behavior is more like not helping, sometimes sabotaging or being extremely critical. So in a way, in some regards, we found that some of the behaviors were more like passively, like passive aggressive, like not intentionally trying to hinder opportunities, but taking digs at a person's kind of self-esteem or their sense of self, that instability aspect. Like, I'm not aggressively like coming for you, but I may undermine your work or your credibility in a meeting, or I might kind of diminish your shine a little bit whenever I get a chance. And in some regards, they have felt like that hyper competitiveness was actually a little bit more direct and more aggressive. The point about the research is that the outcome is that because we have this shared identity, I came in with expectations of greater support, greater loyalty, greater assistance. When I experienced something else, it hurt in a way that if anyone else would have done the same thing, it just wouldn't have affected me as much. So I'm just using me as an example for illustrative purposes. But that's what the research is about. So I've been able to, do talks for focus on like an initiative of empowered women, empower women. I know there were some critics of my work early on that said my research was creating a pathology that made it seem like minorities don't support each other, or minorities don't get along, or minorities are cutthroat when they get into organizations. And that's definitely not what I was saying at all, and definitely not what the research is saying. But it is saying that when there are these systems of, dare I say it, oppression, these systems that create this false sense of scarcity, like there's a scarcity of opportunity, then that can promote behaviors that are more conflictual in the negative sense, or hyper competitive in the negative sense, versus, because there is a positive aspect of competitiveness, iron sharpens iron, but this is the part that's like derailing progress. And it's like there's a collective impact. So it's not even just the impact on the individual, but it's an impact on group perceptions in the organization. I could talk about that all day. Sorry.
Yeah. What I love about that research is the key takeaway that, and I'm glad you addressed this too, how there were some critics of the work before. But you really suggest that it's not the individuals that's creating this conflictual behavior, it's the environment. Because in a supportive environment, a supportive organization, then, there won't be these issues of scarcity being salient to employees in your workforce, right? Because then you won't have these behaviors. And so, like any organization, it's the onus is on them to kind of support, all employees, but it's especially employees who happen to be, few or minoritized in organization, right? Or token employees, because otherwise this is what happens. So, and I also want to thank you again, because you attended the Leadership series for a program that we had at Texas Women's University as well, though. So that was awesome. And I think you touched on that. So we're at the last question before we get to your personal top 5. Okay. And then see how we're doing on time. We're doing okay.
Well, you skipped over one.
So I did. Oh, is there? Oh, in your opinion, and from your experience, what does a truly inclusive organization look like? I sure did. Look at you. See, that's because you're broadcasting. All this like that. I'm over here just trying to wing it.
I was actually really excited about that question. I think otherwise I would have just rolled with it. But I was like, well, operative word is look. So when earlier we defined inclusion, we talked about the feeling, right? And the behaviors. But I know sometimes these terms like DEI or diversity, equity, inclusion, they can be used interchangeably, but they really are separate, right? And so I just remember having a conversation with someone, and someone saying like, any of these DEI initiatives or efforts of inclusion, all I hear when you say inclusion is exclusion. I'm like, what? Man, that's deep, because I'm thinking, whoa, inclusive means all, like all are included. So I really wanted to think about this operative word when you said, what does it look like? I mean, we can easily explain what it feels like, but what does it look like? I would say externally. And say if someone's outside of the organization, the look of inclusion may begin with representation, representativeness. And I'll use myself, for example, cisgender woman, identify as Black. If I'm assessing how inclusive an organization is, I may look at who works for the organization. I may look at some statistics, or I may look at who's in leadership. And if I don't see anyone at different levels of the organization, if anyone looks like me, that's like a signal that I don't know if it's going to be inclusive or not. But that's not really telling me anything, right? That's just a signal. I don't really know, because hey, I've been to organizations where they did look a whole lot like me, and it still didn't feel.
It still didn't feel like there was a sense of inclusion. Yeah.
But it looked like it. Looked like it. So that's why the similarity attraction, research will show that linear relationship is from demographic diversity. So I'm speaking specifically to those like more physical surface level attributes, and any outcome.
So surface level for the audience, attributes that can be readily visible and seen easily. Just FYI.
Brown eyes, white nails,
right? Skin
color. If I see someone, say if I see Dr. J, we're similarly complected. I assume that you identify as Black. I'm making some assumptions just because I see you. And so then if I go into the organization, I'm like, well, Dr. J is there. I must have a fighting chance to succeed because he's doing great. It means I'm going to be doing great. And then I get there and Dr. J is actually kind of a jerk. Like, oh, man. So anyway, I know that's not the case, but that's just showing the limitations when we talk about what inclusion would look like externally. But we do tend to make it is a signal, right?
Yeah.
But it should be just a starting signal. It's a starting signal.
Right.
But internally, what does inclusion look like? What does inclusion look like? It's like being invited to a meeting to have a discussion on a topic or an initiative that's relevant to my work or maybe relevant to my interests. It looks like somebody telling me about a social outing that the team is having and making sure I heard about it and asking me if I want to go or if I need a ride, if they know I'm on the Uber train right now, like I am right now. I'm actually in Bloomington, Minnesota at our headquarters. It could look like an invitation to weigh in on a policy or a process at work or whatever environment you work in. It could look like a smile walking down the hallway, just a warm smile. It could look like a hello. I see that you're new here. It could look like engaging in a conversation with someone who's just genuinely and thoughtfully curious about who I am, who I care about, and how I want to make an impact. Those to me that's what inclusion could look like.
And that's so deep because that's irrespective of whatever identity, demographic background, how everyone presents, right? Because companies can make people feel a sense of inclusion, based on the policies they have and how the other employees behave. Even if I am like maybe the token employee or just few of us, I could still feel included, right? Even if the company is not yet at the place they want to be in terms of diversity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I like how you presented it in those two different lenses. I've never heard it like that before because you're right. Like how external, it could be one way, but just based on assumptions versus internal means a totally different thing. And so sometimes the external, internal perspectives don't always match or line up. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's like the age old, I won't say a debate, but kind of the distinction that we talk about sometimes in the diversity research of surface level diversity and deep level diversity. So our values, our belief systems. So we'll make assumptions and there may be like those assumptions may be valid. Like, oh, I see we both like to wear Jordans. This person is probably cool. I don't
Right.
really know, but it can broker a conversation, and then we may find like,
Mhm.
Jordan,
Yeah.
cool. Great. So it's, encouraging folks anywhere, regardless if a place seems representative of what you would feel more comfortable and where you feel like you can thrive in. And even if it's not, just having the courage to really peel back some of those layers to get to know people and get
Yeah.
to
So
form like
true.
real, genuine relationships.
Yeah. You know what? And I feel guilty if I didn't give a shout out real quick to Dr. Myrtle Bell. We had a great groundbreaking paper, 1998, Harrison Price Bell on surface level versus deep level diversity. Anyway, she was on, I had the privilege
Yes.
to interview her on the podcast too. So, but yeah, got to put that out there. My mentor, I wouldn't be where I'm without her. Anyway, moving on. We have the last question before
All
the
right.
personal top 5. Do you believe prejudice is taught, or are human beings hardwired to create in and out groups in society?
So when I saw the question, it said, do you believe prejudice is taught? And I want to make sure that we define that, because
Okay.
sometimes people just throw these terms out there like
Mm-hmm.
any like prejudice or any of the isms. So like, well, let's define it.
That's good. I think that's important for our audience. How about you define it in terms of how you define prejudice?
Okay. I found a few definitions. I consulted my friend, Dr. Wikipedia, who quoted some other folks. One of the definitions, a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. An affective feeling towards a person based on their perceived group membership. Unfounded or narrowed beliefs, and it may apply to any unreasonable attitude that is unusually resistant to rational influence. I like this one from Dr. Allport on the science of prejudice. A feeling favorable or unfavorable toward a person or thing prior to or not based on actual experience.
Yes, that's
So,
Allport, 1954. Allport, like
yes, yes,
seminal.
it
Yeah.
is.
How
Yes.
did I remember that?
Good training. You did well, Dr. Marbell. You did well. So based on that, I think it's both. So, prejudices can be seemingly favorable and unfavorable. We're talking about biases. And I think it's kind of like the debate in psychology: is it nature or is it nurture? And it's both, right? So there are
Yeah.
some biological factors that may influence some prejudice that we just came here and we saw some. And again, going back to being a parent of 2 children, I see sometimes, my daughter may not want to share her Cheerios with her brother. I'm like, why? I don't want him to have it. But why? He doesn't deserve it. Why? I don't know. She didn't talk to me that was no, she does try. She is a habitual line stepper, but we work on anyway. That's another story. But
That's for parenting podcast.
parenting podcast. But it's one of those things like, I know she hasn't been taught this. She's so new on this earth, but yet she is already displaying these types of kind of biased or prejudiced behaviors against another human being. So that's one aspect of it.
Yeah.
But then the socialization aspect. Okay. Yeah. This kind of stuff. So where some bias may be inherent to our human nature, that behavior is then reinforced by social cues that we have.
Yeah.
So if we are categorizing somebody into an in group or an out group, and we see that, well, if you're in this group, you get more resources, or you get more favoritism, or you get more accolades, and you're like, all right, this group is legit. But to elevate my status in this group, I need to diminish this other group. So those kinds of things are socialized in our environment, our environmental cues. So I think it's a both and. So for me, and using this example as a parent, if I see some kind of biased types of behavior, it is on me to create awareness and to make sure that the systems don't perpetuate and reinforce this types of bias or prejudice. To say, actually, even if you don't understand why you don't want to share, here's what we're going to do, because this is the culture. These are the behaviors that we expect in this organization.
Mm-hmm.
These are the attitudes that we want to celebrate in this house, that we share, we are caring. And, if we need to process or, unpack the why, that's fine. But the behavior that we want to promote, celebrate, and reinforce is one of caring and sharing and understanding and compassion.
Well said. Well said. We are at that time of the hour. Personal top 5.
Okay.
Everyone's ready. Everyone ready? So the question that Dr. Miller wanted me to ask was, drum roll, who are the top 5 influencers that motivate my willingness to keep traveling on this DEI career path? So who are the top 5 influencers that motivate your willingness to keep traveling on this DEI career path?
Well, first of all, I got shout out to my former Ph.D. advisor, Dr. Orlando Richard.
Oh, yeah, he's awesome.
Right. Currently doing big things at University of Massachusetts Amherst. The reason why I shout out to him is because, I feel like many are encouraged to try to be, I won't say not replicas of our advisors, but I just want to say I really appreciate him for giving me the tools and giving me the voice to chart my own path, even if it was unconventional, even though that, I'm not on a traditional academic career path. He's encouraged me to pursue research, not just the kind of research that we knew would get published, but the research that he knew would motivate me to want to keep going, because it was things that I cared about, was interested in, and passionate about pursuing. And so he always kind of gave me that courage and that freedom. And he also checked me a bit too, when I needed to be checked, in terms of, rigor and ethic and perseverance. So he's seeing a shout out for him. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it would be kind of a disappointment to some of my folks who are on the PhD journey. Like, I was cheating on the field by dipping my toe back into
the industry.
the industry,
Yeah.
but instead it was all love. And so seeing that he's still supporting me and championing me, it motivates me. Again, on this same vein, my PhD project squad, our people that we were going through the trenches with, when I had to create instrumental network of support. And again, part of my own fear or hesitancy about even being public, that I'm no longer on the academic route, but I'm on a practitioner route. I just wanted to still be invited to the reunion, to the family reunion, and to the barbecue. And I still get invited. Like, I'm here with you, Dr. J. So thank you. That motivates me to keep going, because we see how the different ways that we can make an impact through research, through platforms like this one, to the work that I'm doing in industry, but also bringing those resources back, those critical, hard pressed resources that aren't just trying to sell a license package, but are actually trying to help support organizations to do this real meaningful work. So shout out to you all. My mom, Linda Ann. Oh, she'll get so mad at me if she heard me say her first and middle name. But even when she didn't understand the path that I was on, even when she wanted to protect me, because to be real, you all, putting yourself out there like this, especially in times like this where, for some reason, promoting and elevating humanity for all is under fire. But my mom encourages me and prays for me and empowers me to just stay authentic and to keep my moral compass on Front Street, and to stay committed to this change maker work. I got a shout out to Monica Smith. I report to her at the Toro Company. She said something while I was still just interviewing. I remember saying something like, I just want to make sure when I come in, and I know that, so transitioning from one career to the next is not always an easy sale with recruiters, because you have to try to make it make sense. And so, yeah, some people said things like, oh, well, we want a DEI leader who doesn't just who can do more than just teach and teach about it, but who can actually do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. People have a lot of misconceptions about higher ed and what, uh, you know,
But
we can and cannot do. Right.
yes. So Monica, she is one who said basically challenged those limiting beliefs. When I said, I just want to show you guys, thank you that, I'm a prove myself. She's like, you don't have anything to prove. You were already a value add before you even stepped in this door. You just being who you are.
I like
Now it's
Monica
just like,
already.
honestly, she's pretty dope.
It's good.
And then my husband, my rock, he holds it down for us to allow me to do this work. And he encouraged me to take this leap of faith and to be on this journey. Because like I said, it's hard work is hard work. And I just appreciate his love and his support so that I can stay on this journey. That's my top 5.
That's wonderful. That's beautiful. Yes. Top 5. That's a good top 5. That's a good one. And that wasn't even on our list. I'm going to add this one to the list too. Top 5 influence and motivates your willingness to travel on the career path. When you sent it back to me, I was like, oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for that. You've added to what we can do here at Top 5 BEI. So audience, now's the time now. If you want to, you can share your video. You can ask the question using the reactions. You can also use the chat if you want to. Do we have any questions from the Zoom audience?
I hope you guys are still there.
Wow. Oh, wow. This is the first, what? No questions at all. Don't be shy. Don't be shy, y'all.
All right, hold on. I think I do have a question because I wrote down. Well, first, since I did come in late, I wanted to really hear about how you felt about the company, Toro. You said something about the DEI performance and everything with the company. Like, how is that for you personally?
Well, that's a great question. I've been there 5 months now, and I'm not gonna lie, when I looked at the statistics, I was like, whoop, boy. Walk down the hallway, I would make jokes, well, y'all, if you need to find me in the cafeteria, I'm gonna stand out.
Well, they say my dad used to say, what, you talking about like flying buttermilk? That's what my dad used to say. Anyway, maybe not. I'm sorry.
What the experiences that I've had have been those things that I talked about as what does inclusion look like? And it has looked like I walk into our headquarters or I've been we're on MS Teams, and it is this genuine, this sincere welcoming that I have felt as a hello, or everyone I see is just a hello. It's a warm smile. I have not felt, not even, and then, I mean, they do pay my salary, but they're not paying me to say this. And part of my pillars are authenticity, inclusiveness, inclusive leadership, and courageous leadership. So I don't lie. I'll just not say anything. But that's been my experience. And it makes me even more committed to helping move the company forward, because I feel like we have something great that maybe we've just held a little bit close to the vest. We need to encourage some people to be okay with being cold. in in our headquarters location in Bloomington, which is in the Twin Cities area, between Minneapolis and St. Paul, or even some of our other locations. Like we have locations in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, in El Paso, in Monterey. We have several international locations. So we are truly a global company. And it's been cool that has been the thread on every interaction that I've had so far, where I have felt valued and I have felt welcome. I even see it with, like, it doesn't matter if you're an intern or if you've been there like 5 days or if you've been there 20 years. We actually have some folks who have worked there like 40 years. That's been really cool. Yes.
That's a good sign. That's a great sign. Yeah.
What people get excited about is just the people that they get to work with. And So that's been my experience. Now, that doesn't mean that people, and I don't know because I haven't talked to all 11,546 employees. I don't know if that's the number. I just
Oh, I was
honestly,
like, oh, man, you came
no,
prepared.
no. It's close to 12,000. So
Mm.
of course, I don't know everyone's belief systems or everyone's worldviews. I can only go based on my interactions and my experiences. And so my hope is that, and I've been working and researching long enough to know that just because my experience is one way doesn't mean that's everyone's experience. And so our experience, one thing that we talk about in our team is we want to promote and encourage and train and provide resources and tools so that people will continue to choose the Toro Company every single day. And then I add on to that no matter where you sit, no matter where you are, that you experience that sense of being valued, being heard, being seen, and being celebrated, not tolerated. That's like petty, passive aggressive. No, we want true honoring and celebration. That's been my experience so far. Like I said, I'm 5 months in.
That's good to know. Thank you for that question. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, and thank you for answering because, that's just as a woman of color myself, like for me personally, like I've just been like slightly insecure when it comes to looking for, different jobs and everything. And I'm actually about to graduate soon. So I'm like, okay, let me find me an entry level job that's, inclusive and all these different requirements and stuff. And it's like, I guess I get myself scared with the stereotype of, oh, you could have all the qualifications, but I really love that for you because it just makes me want to actually, you don't know until you get there. You don't know until you experience it. So, your experience are yours. And I did have one last question. You were talking about your research and you were saying that I kind of stopped in the sentence, but you said your research is saying that the systems that creates the false sense of scarcity create issues. Were you saying that create issues for minorities in the work environment? I was trying to remember
It can create, I say it can create issues for all, because if there's if there's toxicity, if there's a toxic climate in the organization or a toxic culture, it will create issues for those who are marginalized in the organization, but everybody's feeling that. Everybody in
Right.
some regard is feeling that, especially if you have folks operating out of just kind of the Machiavellianism where it's like real cutthroat. Even people that feel like they're on the favorable side of, and I'm talking like about organizational politics and environments that are, even if it was homogenous, even if it was all women, all men, all white men, all black men, if you have this type of culture and environment that promotes that kind of hyper competitiveness, kind of, I have some other words I want to say because I have worked in environments like that. And while, I focus solely on what is the impact for those with a shared identity who experience that, the negative impact is actually universal. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, that's so true. It's funny that you say that because, like, you could go to the all black firm or something like that, and I'm a black man, and it could be a toxic environment, and I could, just not like it at all because it's still not inclusive. Kind of going back to what you mentioned before, right? But thank you for that question, and congratulations too. By the way, you said you're graduating this year. Is that right?
Yes, May 12th, 9 o'clock in the morning, y'all.
What?
So I'm coming. I appreciate
All right.
it.
Someone asked, I'm
Good on
sorry, I
you.
know this is not my role.
Yeah.
Someone
No,
asked
I
if they
see.
have a question. Can they put in the chat? Yes.
Yep, you sure can. So what's your question? Thank you. So the question is, I am in the medical field. I cannot speak for the field as a whole, but my personal experiences have been that DEI isn't promoted in the same way in the medical field as it is in other spaces and fields. Unfortunately, this is concerning considering our education, perceptions, and experiences mold the way we care for others. Do you have any experience at DEI for medical spaces?
Yes. Actually, Yeah, I mean, I did a study on nursing. In the medical field, there's so many different nuances and status hierarchies that are at play that are really intersectional. So there's like the race and ethnic diversity, you have your gender diversity and there's like these gender stereotypes of who would be in which role, and then kind of the culture, the dynamic of depending on the different roles of your position in your title. So I'm trying to think where to go with this. It depends. I've worked with like small medical offices, and it was alarming at some of the things. And so we're not even talking about DEI. We're talking about folks who were brought in under the auspices of we want to promote a more inclusive culture. But really what they were wanting was someone to come in and be the scapegoat for some of the unethical practices that were happening in that medical office. So yeah, I think it just depends. I know that if you're working in a hospital system where there's more like accountability and visibility, you tend to see more efforts and initiatives because your stakeholder network is looking like yeah. And then with the patient scores being such a driver, so yeah, I'm sorry to be fumbling with this question, but it just depends on like, are you at a large like hospital system, or are you in
Yeah.
a small branch where if there's no checks and balances, it really does fall within what is the leader, what is the leader of that facility, what do they believe and what do they want to champion. I will say, and I think applies for all DEI efforts or DEI work initiatives work when they are supported and initiated by leadership.
Yeah, that's so true. And what's interesting also about healthcare is that I was talking to someone about this the other day, how they're in healthcare and they talk about how in order sometimes to care for people, individuals, not just healthcare, but also if you're in social work, sometimes
Mhm.
too, you have to be someone that doesn't have a high degree of empathy, because otherwise you would not be able to function, because you'd have all this baggage. You'd always be thinking about your patients, your clients. I mean, imagine, the number of deaths you see, the number of injuries, the shootings. If you're a social worker, all of the things that you see that get dysfunctional in families, and seeing, you know, children and in negative situations. Right. And so, um, you have to go home with your own family. Right. And so, and I say this to say that, and there's also anecdotally, I was listening to some radio series talking about how some of the best doctors don't have a lot of empathy because they're able to disconnect themselves from the work that they do. But as you and I know, look at diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Empathy is foundational to a lot of that. Now, this may not
Yeah.
necessarily be like the nurses. Nurses are different, because, and I have some research too, where we're looking at nursing and their response to bullying behaviors, because
Mm. Oh,
there's
we
a high
might need to
degree of,
collaborate.
yeah.
I have some data. We might.
Okay. All right. Yeah. There's a high degree of bullying, as we know,
Mhm.
especially not only just from doctors to bullying nurses, but also nurses creating an environment of workplace incivility as well.
Yeah,
But
nurses to
so,
nurses, and in some cases, nurses to doctors,
and nurses to
depending.
doctors, right?
Yeah.
But going back to the whole empathy thing, so a lot of healthcare professionals, they have to disconnect themselves. And so if you're in the mindset of always doing that, or if you're someone who's predisposed to do that already, we're talking about nature versus nurture. We start talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. Sometimes I found that, I mean, they just kind of maybe don't get it, right? And these are also some of the same people, when people don't realize this, when you go into a hospital, and I know a lot of people in the medical field, they'll talk about your ashy legs if you they'll talk about your ashy skin behind your back sometimes. Something it happens, right? And for years, a lot of this type of what I would call unprofessional, unethical behavior doesn't get checked by leaders because their goal is saving lives, and a lot of these other things they believe are not really as important as accomplishing the task of saving this person's life or giving this person the best healthcare that the individual needs, which of course is very important. And that should be the top of what's on top of their mind. But at the same time, there's this whole other dark side of how, they're human beings like everyone else too. And you talked about this, as the hospital matters, if it's a public or private, not-for-profit, that matters too, because it's about, shareholders. If you're a hospital that is publicly traded, all these things impact it. And some of our research is kind of teasing some of this out right now. And so I say all that to say that, those might be some reasons for that. And so it'll take time, it'll take patience, and it'll take a shift in culture and a lot of, in the healthcare field, in my opinion. But it's changing. I mean, it's a good book, by the way. A friend of mine, Tom Fisher, called The Emergency. It's a New York Best Time seller. He really dives deep into the healthcare field and talks about all these nuances and how there's, systemic inequity in healthcare and things like that too, that you all might want to check out. That might kind of help answer some of your questions as well.
And I just want to say, I know you just asked if I had any experience, and I could have just said yes, but I also want to give some advice that, your self-care, prioritizing your care. Dr. J, kind of like you said earlier, when you're in a field of caring for others, that sometimes your humanity, your needs come second nature. And yeah, no. No, you have to, and I, I'm okay with empathy. I believe, and I've learned this, that I can be direct yet compassionate. I can be assertive and still have compassion on the pain and needs and suffering of others. But what I will no longer do is pretend like any type of oppressive or inequitable treatment is okay. It's just not okay. And I know that's easier said than done, but I had to take some courageous steps to prioritize my own health and well-being in the midst of caring for others.
So we have a hand raised, and this will be our last question before we close the podcast today. So, Latrice, what's your question? You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute your mic if you like.
I'll go ahead and unmute my mic. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm the one who asked the last question, but I just wanted to thank you for the long answer. So I wasn't expecting just a yes or no. So I do appreciate everything else that you said, but I just wanted to add a little context to the reason why I asked that question. I mean, I've been in healthcare for 20 years, so a very long time, but here recently, I guess just a little background about me. I mean, I am cisgender, I'm female, Black woman, working as a nurse practitioner for almost 10 years, but I'm also part of the LGBTQ community. And here recently, I've had a lot of issues at work about how I represent myself in that way. And it has gone up to upper management with no support. And we are a private clinic connected with a school district, which adds another caveat to that whole situation. So I think just having that experience was really eye-opening. And I already know and understand how DI can come into play in other situations in healthcare. So that's why I asked that question.
Well, hey, thank you so much for sharing. I knew there was more to it. I was like, oh, and I was actually silently hoping that you would come so we could just dialogue. And so, and I wish I had answers. And I would say, not just in healthcare, but I know it, like you said, just even calling out those nuances, those institutional nuances that really need to just build a bridge and catch up with.
Fade away.
It's I feel like, there are some organizations that are doing what they need to do and still aren't doing enough, especially when it comes to our LGBTQIA plus communities. Either because I feel like even just by being passive and not saying anything, to me is also not celebrating and not honoring, not valuing our people. And so I am so sorry. I know we don't even know each other, but so this is that empathy piece. I'm like, I can have empathy all I want to and still do my job. But I am so sorry that has been your experience. And I wish there were answers that I had. And I also hope that you will have, I'm not calling out your company. I'm not saying leave, but I'm saying you deserve to be in an environment, in a place where you are honored and celebrated, and that when you raise an issue that it is respected, do something, and I know many institutions, many companies are on a journey, but I'm like, if at this day and age, it's like, if gotta make sure I use my words. We have choices, and we can, and this is easier said than done. So I'm not minimizing your situation or your opportunities, but I just want to say I hope, because I've been in environments. I can't relate to your specific experiences, but I can be empathetic with the feeling. And so I hope that you can be in an environment where you feel like you can flourish and you are celebrated and respected and honored. And also, I don't know if you have entrepreneurial aspirations, that if that does not come to fruition, that you create the opportunity for yourself and for others to have that experience. So once again, long-winded, but just want to say thank you for sharing and for hearing me. Thank you for all of you.
Oh, congratulations. Opening your own practice in July. That's what's up. Yeah. Good for you.
Well, please keep in touch. I want to hear about it.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for that question, and congratulations to our graduate, and congratulations to our new entrepreneur. Thank you all for being vulnerable and sharing and asking these questions. Thank you, Carliss, Dr. Miller, for agreeing to be on my podcast. And so I'm so thankful to know people like you, and I look forward to us connecting on some of that nursing research too. That sounds interesting. Yeah, Ty is on the paper we're working on right now too. Yeah. So the next paper we can all connect. Yeah. So sounds good. All right. Well, thank you all for joining Top 5 DEI. If you want to be on this podcast, if you want to learn more about future podcasts, or sign up to know about our podcast, or see this one and know when it's going to launch and drop in mid-May. We're thinking maybe Juneteenth, but anyway. Oh no, this is season 2 we're recording. Oops, sorry about that. We'll edit this part out. But you know what? I'm gonna try and put this in season 1. I'm gonna try and add this to the season 1 one. So I have a good engineer. He edit everything out. If he doesn't, hey, you know what? I'm authentic. I don't. Hey, it is what it is. I'm just being.
Thank you all.
But you all signed up. You can visit imagineconsultingllc.com. That's spelled Imagine without an E. So it's IMAGIN consultingllc.com. You can sign up for our newsletter and learn about podcasts that are coming up. And also you can have access to a lot of resources, DEI activities and games, and also subscribe to our Imagine YouTube channel. Thank you all for joining us here at Top 5 DEI. Have a good one. Peace out. Peace. Enjoy your day. Peace out from Dr. J.